Call 911. Now she's turning blue, Bernard Kellerman roared. As he let the mop handle clatter to the marble and bolted forward, shocked gasps ricocheted to the glass-walled executive boardroom. Just minutes earlier, Alexander Ashcroft, the billionaire CEO of Ashcroft Holdings, in the glittering heart of Philadelphia, had been commanding the head of the polished Obsidian Conference table, her voice like ice and fire, delivering the quarterly earnings with ruthless precision. Then mid-sentence, her words fractured. Her manicured hand flew to her chest, her breath snagged, the room froze in a heartbeat of terror. As her body seized once, twice, then crumpled to the carpet like a marionette with its strings cut. At first, no one moved. 8 executives in $5,000 suits worth more than Bernard made in a lifetime. Someone whispered, "She's faking it." Another hissed, "Call security. She can't be serious." Then reality slammed, and Alexander Ashcroft wasn't breathing. Her lips were draining to a sickening violet. But Bernard didn't wait. He crashed through the heavy double doors, shoving past a cloud of $1,000 cologne and tailored wool. "Bernard, what the hell are you doing?" A voice barked. "You don't belong here." Another snarl, "Get this filth out." "I know CPR," he yelled back, but they didn't care. Alexandra lay twisted on her side, one arm flung across her chest, her lips sliding into a ghostly gray blue. She had no pulse. Bernard dropped hard to his knees beside her. "Miss Ashcroft, stay with me." Panic clawing up his throat, he pressed shaking fingers to her neck. Nothing. Then muscle memory took over. He'd taken one free CPR class years ago at the crumbling West Philly Rec Center, just with a $20 grocery voucher. But right now, that instructor's voice drowned out every scream in the room. "If they're not breathing, you become their lungs." He tilted her head back, pinched her nose, and sealed his mouth over hers. "He's kissing her," a woman shrieked. "That's disgusting. Get him off her now." Something heavy cracked across Bernard's spine. Maybe a briefcase, maybe a designer heel. White-hot pain exploded down his back. He grunted, but kept going. 2 rescue breaths. Then interlaced his callous hands and started compressions. 1, 2, 3, 4. Another blow smashed into his ribs. "You dirty janitor," someone spat. "Don't you dare touch her." The boardroom erupted into pure chaos, phones raised, fists swinging, voices shrieking. But Bernard was a rock in storm, arms on fire, back screaming, eyes stinging with sweat. "Don't you die on me," he growled through clenched teeth. 26, 27. Someone seized his collar and yanked him backward. He ripped free, slammed compressions harder. 2 more breaths. Suddenly Alexandra's chest heaved. She choked, coughed raggedly. Air rasped back into her lungs like a drowning woman, breaking the surface. Her eyes fluttered. She was alive. Bernard collapsed beside her, every muscle trembling, spine throbbing, ribs bruised, hands numb from the force, but she was breathing. The suits swarmed her now, stumbling over each other. "Miss Ashcroft, Alexandra, can you hear us?" Paramedics burst through the doors, wheeling the stretcher, shouting, "Clear the way." One knelt and asked to perform CPR. "I did," Bernard rasped, voice raw. Before he could say another word, a tall, silver-haired man stepped forward, badge flashing. "Tyler Brigham, CFO." His face twisted in revulsion. "Name?" He demanded. "Bernard Kellerman, sir. I'm just a janitor." "You put your mouth on Miss Ashcroft," the CFO sneered, as if Bernard had poisoned her instead of saving her. "She wasn't breathing," Bernard answered quietly. "We'll be reviewing the footage," the CFO snapped. "Leave the building now, and do not come back until we contact you." Bernard's throat closed, his back bleeding under the uniform. He scanned the room. Not one thank you from the people whose boss he'd just dragged back from death. He bent, grabbed his bucket with shaking hands, and wheeled it out, each push echoing like a gavel. But Bernard had no idea that the second he disappeared through those doors, a chain of events had already begun inside a private hospital suite. Events that would shatter his world, tear it apart, and rebuild into something he never dared dream. If this story hooked you, smash that subscribe button right now, because what happens next will leave you speechless. Where the truth behind Alexandra Ashcroft's collapse will shock you even more. That night Bernard sat slumped in a rigid bus seat, engulfed by the throng, his spine bent as if attempting to crumple inward and vanish from existence. City lights flashed by the pain, elongating into extended hazy streaks that mirrored his gaze, eyes weary and vacant by the time the bus let him off in his usual area. Darkness had already devoured all the atmosphere, contained just a far-off groan of a cargo train, and The energetic yells of children tossing a ball and the lane noises that seemed to pertain to an existence distant from his Molly dashed to greet him at the entrance shoeless, gripping her tattered stuff. "Bear your back late," she uttered in a small, anxious tone. "Are you all right, Dad?" "I'm all right, honey," Bernard responded, a falsehood he'd become all too accustomed to uttering. Merely a wild day at the office. Supper consisted of warmed-up macaroni and cheese plus remaining sautéed veggies. Molly prattled on about class, and Bernard bobbed his head occasionally, although his thoughts remained ensnared someplace within that chilly meeting room from before, when Janet Holloway, the adjacent resident who babysat Molly during evening hours, bid farewell. To depart, Bernard mustered a grin. Despite his mouth feeling weighted once Molly dozed off, he reclined on the slim bed pad, heating the radiator hiss in the gloom. His digits grazed the contusion on. His rear keen stinging ache. He shut his lids yet. The vision of Alexander Ashcroft prone senseless under his palms repeated incessantly like an overly brightened reel. He'd rescued a lady's existence, and still had perceived only an impoverished custodian, a lone parent, who presumed to contact a tycoon. He was unaware that the instant he inhaled vitality back into somebody diminishing was poised to alter his whole destiny, simply not in the manner he anticipated. The following dawn, Bernard Kellerman positioned himself before the Ashcroft, holding skyscraper, donning the identical slate attire he'd donned for the prior trio of months. The sun had scarcely ascended its gentle golden glow, cascading over the square. He clenched his hold on his meal sack, a synthetic shopping pouch containing a peanut butter sandwich, a marred apple, and the aspiration that matters will revert to ordinary. He inhaled deeply and advanced toward the spinning entrance, but prior to grasping the knobbin, limb thrust forth, blocking him. "Sir, you cannot proceed." The guard stayed at his timbre level, and devoid of feeling, Bernard fluttered his eyes. "Would I labor here evening rotation? I'm on the 22nd level." The guard refrained from glancing at him. "I received orders to bar you entry." A frigid tremor coursed along Bernard's backbone. "Why, I committed no error. Reach out to personnel," the fellow retorted, pivoting aside as though the issue was concluded. Bernard remained rigid at the portal. The AM breeze sliced through his slender coat as flows of workplace staff strode by him sans halt. He sensed like a phantom unnoticed while laboring, and now thrust utterly from view, he looped to the lateral access, grasping the dim expectation that this was merely a mix-up. Perhaps somebody neglected to revise his rotation timetable. Perhaps they required to converse with him regarding the resuscitation. Perhaps at the maintenance count of the evening rotation, overseer glanced upward, astonished. Bernard Kellerman. "Hold on." Bernard lingered in the constricted corridor next to the array of employee cabinets, his moniker still inscribed on cabinet number 7 in chaotic ebony ink skewed. Acquainted a decade later, the overseer reappeared. In his palm was a secured packet, his countenance impassive. "You're dismissed," he declared. Bernard sensed something within him fracture sharp and savage, like somebody snapping a skeletal in his torso. "Dismissed? But for what reason? What did I commit?" The overseer lifted his shoulders. "Personnel indicated it's for improper behavior concerning upper management. That's all I'm aware." Bernard's palms quivered as he unsealed the packet. Within was a dismissal notice and his ultimate compensation. No parting pay, no additional clarification, merely the term's occupation. Concluded promptly. The expression improper behavior resonated in his cranium. Like a warning wail, Bernard lingered there for an extended period in that constricted corridor, a solitary portal shutting at his rear, as tidily as a judgment outside existence persisted, as if naught had transpired. Individuals informal, where sipped their espressos, cab klaxons wailed. Devices chimed ceaselessly, and Bernard ambled like a vacant husk. He failed to recall how numerous quadrants he traversed. All merged, they believe. I perpetrated something amiss, they believe. He drooped onto a transit halt seat, his limbs yielding beneath him. His device vibrated a dispatch from a colleague, a capture the collective conversation. Observe that custodian weirdo was entirely upon Miss Ashcroft when she fainted. Appeared like he was smooching her. Another repulsive. Was that violation? Bernard's torso constricted, his digits chilled. They had distorted the reality of resuscitation, the inhalations that preserve her existence. They had transformed it into something repugnant. His device vibrated anew, a fuzzy surveillance capture, yet distinct, sufficient to sting Bernard. Leaning toward Alexandra Ashcroft, an instant of preserving an existence converted into condemning proof, Bernard permitted the device to fall upon. His leg overhead, a colossal advertisement displayed Alexandra Ashcroft grinning authoritatively alongside the motto Honesty, Foresight, Guidance. He sensed nauseous the transit conveyed him back to the subdued dwelling in western Philadelphia. Molly sprinted forth, her back premature. Did they discharge me? Her gaze expanded why I lacked knowledge. He compelled a grin, merely a confusion. Janet observed him from the cooking surface, the television. Silence, you appear as if you've encountered a specter. I'm okay, Janet. Bernard responded another falsehood, merely fatigued. Evening descended. He reclined, gazing into the obscurity, radiator hissing, as if grumbling someplace in the passage. A dispute ignited, then a youngster wept gently existence. Continued say. Bernard's fell immobilized. He activated his device. Dispatches continued inundating. A vocal dispatch from the lady at the maintenance division. Hey, I'm uncertain what transpired, but folks are claiming you committed something improper with Miss Ashcroft. Perhaps you ought to remain silent for a period. He deactivated. The device allowed it to tumble onto the bed pad. Improper, such a simple term when individuals desire to accept the worst. Bernard shut his lids, recalling the instant Alexandra's torso lurched back to vitality. Beneath his palms, the initial inhalation returning to her. He had rescued somebody, and now they regarded him as if his palms were too impoverished, too filthy, too inferior to possess the privilege to preserve an existence. He interred his visage in the cushion and wept. Rescuing somebody ought to have been a positive matter, but in this metropolis, in this realm, it was his personal existence being obliterated tomorrow. He would need to seek another occupation, rap on portals, cleanse whatever location would employ him. But this evening the unfairness was too burdensome to endure, and he possessed no means of knowing that elevated above the metropolis in a loft illuminated with gentle luminescence, Alexandra Ashcroft, bolted alert from a terror, grasping her torso heart, thumping the resonance of an unfamiliar timbre drawing her back from the obscurity. She simply lacked knowledge of his moniker, yet Alexandra Ashcroft, perched on the brink of her monarch dimension, bed her whole form soaked in perspiration. The dawn illumination seeped through the slender drapes of her loft, casting a gentle yet chilly pale aura hue across the chamber. Her heart throbbed ferociously in her torso, as if endeavoring to erupt through her ribs. The terror had recurred the fourth evening consecutively in it. She lingered suspended in a pitch-obscure abyss, asphyxiating her limbs, extending in frantic clutching, no illumination, no noise, solely vacancy, engulfing all entire. Then abruptly it manifests anew, the timbre, a gentleman's timbre, quivering yet stable, slicing to the obscurity. Come on, inhale. Return each occasion. She bolted alert, gasping, as if hauled from profound water, and each occasion the moniker, the gentleman, behind that timbre glided through her recollection prior to her capturing it, leaving solely a acquainted tub persisting in her torso. Alexandra massaged her visage, lingered for one additional inhalation, then arose, strolling barefoot across the chilly marble surface into the cooking area. The Java apparatus beeped mildly. The concoction had been planned since the prior evening. Her aid always guaranteed flawlessness down to the instant as the abundant aroma of Java permeated the atmosphere. Alexandra reclined against the surface, eyes wandering downward toward the metropolis. Beneath Philadelphia was arousing at her saws, cab cycles, and road merchants establishing their wagons at the intersections, and she positioned on the 30th level, above it all sealed from the realm by vitreous wealth and quietude. But this dawn something sense awry. She retrieved her device and scrolled through her correspondences, packed endorsements, media summaries, a footage dialogue solicitation from a publicity enterprise naught. Referencing the occurrence, she accessed Ashcroft Holdings Inner. Gateways still gnawed her forehead. Constricted somebody had preserved her existence. The physicians had been explicit. She had entered abrupt cardiac halt. Survival proportions in instances like that were beneath 10% sans prompt resuscitation, signifying somebody had maintained her heart pulsating inhalation by inhalation until the emergency responders arrived. And yet nobody had informed her who it was her. Administrators had been courteous, but elusive. The circumstance has been managed, madam. We've adopted the suitable interactions, Miss Ashcroft. Those responses caused her epidermis to tingle, who had positioned their palms on her torso, who had pressed their mouth against hers, inhaling vitality back into her lungs every occasion. She shut her lids, her thoughts drifted to that vision, that timbre hoarse with tension, yet unswerving, drawing her back from the brink. She could nearly sense those palms and knew the force on her ribs, the warmth of inhalation near her visage. Who was he? Why would nobody inform her? Alexandra Ashcroft was not the sort to be maintained in the obscurity, not in her personal enterprise, and certainly not regarding her personal endurance. She retrieved her device and dialed a acquainted numeral marcus. She uttered, as the chief of protection responded, I desire protection. Recording from a meeting room on the dawn of the occurrence. Madam Personnel has already examined the taping. Legal is retaining a duplicate. I didn't inquire who examined it. Alexandra retorted, her timbre honing. I desire it in my messages immediately. "Yes, madam." She terminated the dialogue and pivoted back toward the pain. This occasion, the vitreous solely mirrored faint mist and her personal visage. She appeared pallid, depleted, remote, like somebody drawn back from the brink sands, ever knowing who extended to her a lady whose existence had been restored to her, but not the verity. 20 minutes subsequently, the correspondence arrived. Alexandra accessed the footage document on the display. She observed herself seized by the chilly, indifferent gaze of a monitoring lens she was positioned at. The head of the extended vitreous discussion table motioning midway through a dress, then faltering one palm soared up to her torso, her mouth shifted. But no noise emerged, her form swayed, then tumbled like a drenched fabric onto the surface. Individuals around her leaped to their feet. Somebody shrieked, another darted their gaze around, but nobody advanced toward her. Then the portal at the distant extremity of the chamber swung open. A gentleman in a slate custodian's attire entered, thrusting a swab. Pale Alexandra instinctively reclined nearer to the display. At first he appeared startled, but when he observed her on the ground, he discarded all and surged forth sans hesitation. He knelt beside her and verified for a pulse. His palm shifted swiftly, urgent. He pinched her nose, executed rescue inhalations, and interlaced his digits over her breastbone, and tallied each compression. Aloud, she observed his visage closely. His tightened mandible, his tear-bordered eyes, the expression ablaze with dread and resolve. He disregarded the yells behind him, the directing digits, the lips articulating accusations. He concentrated on one matter, solely maintaining her vital. And then she observed that another gentleman approached. Tyler Brigham, her principal financial officer, his visage distorted with rage and repulsion. He seized the custodian's shoulder and yanked him away from her. Alexandra struck halt, her palms quivered. She observed the remainder of the recording. In quietude, the custodian was accompanied. Out like a felon, no grasp, no gratitude, no recognition. He had preserved her existence and was chastised for it. Alexandra ascended gradually, her torso constricted not from her cardiac ailment, but from another sentiment ascending within her wrath. She dialed a new Marcus. She uttered her timbre, now low and chilly as metal. Whereas Bernard Kellerman, madam, the gentleman, in the recording custodian, what occurred to him? There was a concise quietude on the opposite extremity. He was dismissed by personnel. There were particular claims. Alexandra nearly snarled. He preserved my existence, madam. There were worries about appearances, responsibility, media hazard. Then he meticulously, Alexandra interrupted him, locate him, location dossier. All I desired, all on my workstation before midday. But yes, Miss Ashcroft. She disconnected, exhaling gradually, her impeccably immaculate cooking area abruptly, since uncomfortably vacant for the initial occasion. Since arousing in the clinic, she sensed something fractured beneath her breastbone, not ache, remorse far beneath. In remote western Philadelphia, Bernard Kellerman knew naught. He lacked knowledge. She had observed the recording, lacked knowledge. She was replaying the picture of his visage, lacked knowledge. The realm that had already pulverized him once was about to quiver anew, but he would very shortly. 3 days elapsed, and Bernard Kellerman still hadn't secured employment. His mornings glided by in quietude, with solely the noise of an age-crimson stylus he discovered lodged in the settee, etching rings around occupation advertisements in the notices in the PM. He ventured portal to portal, washing facilities, eatery, sanitation firms, any spot that might compensate adequately to maintain the illumination in his diminutive dwelling from extinguishing. But all over the response was identical. A reluctant glance, a muted murmur, then a courteous negation of the cranium chillier than the wintry breeze. Exterior, by the dawn of the fourth day, the moniker Bernard Kellerman had evolved into a gossip, disseminating like vapor. At the washing facility on the intersection, a youthful lady folding garments peeked over at him and uttered softly, "You're the fellow from that structure. Correct the one," who she drifted off when he glanced up. Disregard, it's not. Bernard attempted to grin, but it never attained his gaze. It's fine, he uttered mildly. You can articulate at the gentleman who endeavored to rescue somebody and got discharged for it. She compressed her lips, collectively her timbre descending lower. Folks claim you committed more than that. Bernard refrained from inquiring what more than that signified. He already comprehended the web, had seized his resuscitation, and warped it into something sordid. Sleazy weblogs, exploded titles like custodian, couldn't maintain his palms to himself. Traversing the boundary with senseless female executive, somebody had disclosed a static frame from the protection, recording fuzzy granular, but distinct sufficient to sow uncertainty. The picture of him stooping down to execute resuscitation had become proof-back residence, the diminutive dwelling aroma like aged flooring, and reheated Java Janet Holloway, perched by the pane, donning her perusing spectacles and grasping a large Font periodical, the municipal assembly declined the lowest compensation. Increase anew, she grumbled and glanced up. Have you consumed yet? Not yet, Bernard uttered, cleansing a cup in the basin. Permit me to prepare something for Molly. Initially, the youngster shuffled into the cooking area, locks disheveled, massaging her gaze. Daddy, are you heading to labor today? Not today, honey, Bernard responded tenderly. I'm taking a brief respite. Oh, Molly scowled. Miss Janet claimed folks are being cruel to you. Why? Bernard stooped down and swept a lock of locks from her visage. Occasionally folks are frightened of matters they don't comprehend, but matters will be fine. I vowed, Janet exhaled. Increase the periodical, child. You can't combat the ones who compose the tales. They always triumph. I don't desire to combat, Bernard uttered quietly. I merely desire them to articulate the verity. That PM, he took the transit to a diminutive sanitation service on 18th Avenue, the proprietor, a bulky gentleman in a formal blouse. That aroma like stogie fumes peeked over his documents. Then place it down on a workstation you used to labor at Ashcroft Holdings. Yes, sir, the gentleman bobbed, gradually intersecting his limbs. I've heard regarding that circumstance. I can't afford that sort of notice here. I'm apologetic, Bernard's pharynx. When arid notice you signify preserving somebody's existence. I signify, the gentleman uttered bluntly, dispute customers don't like difficulty, attempt someplace else. When Bernard retreated, exterior the heavens had obscured, gust sliced through his slender overcoat as he ambled along the fractured pavement toward the transit halt. A cluster of adolescents positioned exterior a convenience marked their devices glowing azure as he traversed one prodded his companion and spoke audible sufficient for Bernard to hear. Yo, that's him, the custodian fellow. I observed the segment dude was smooching. That tycoon lady for genuine merriment erupted, pursuing Bernard down the quadrant. By the time he attained the transit halt, his gaze were scorching. He sat down, cranium-inclined limbs enveloped around himself, as if he could prevent from fracturing apart. When he arrived, residence Janet was on the device, her timbre strained and muted. Observing him, she cupped a palm over the speaker. It's your sibling, she uttered quietly. She claims folks at Chapel are conversing. They observed some footage online. Bernard shut his lids, of course. They had that evening. He endeavored to erase his social platform's accounts, but every occasion he did another counterfeit profile, emerged with his image and vicious subtitles. Lone dad, pursuing tycoon gentleman who violated female executive. He deactivated the device, sat in the obscurity. The quietude was so profound that the drone of the cooler sounded like the sole noise remaining in the realm when he ultimately reclined beside Molly. His form felt like lead. His rear still throbbed from the strikes he'd endured in the meeting room. He pressed his palm over the contusion, recalling that keen muted noise, the fracture, collision, the inhalation compelled out his lungs. Fairness isn't sightless, he murmured. It merely declines to glance down. In the midst of the evening, the device rang. He bolted alert and fumbled to respond. Mr. Kellerman, a timbre keen, chilly and scripted. Yes, this is personnel from Ashcroft Holdings are. Inner probe is complete. His heart surged. So, does that signify, Icon, your occupation has been terminated effective promptly? The lady interrupted. The inner assessment has determined your behavior to be improper. We will not be pursuing accusations, but we firmly advise you not to return to premises. Bernard shot upright, turning to stone. Improper. I was executing resuscitation. She wasn't inhaling. The determination is ultimate, Mr. Kellerman. Your last compensation will be mailed to you. The dialogue terminated. The connection went lifeless, tidy, and pitiless, as if he had never existed at all. For an extended instant, Bernard merely sat there with the device pressed to his ear, gazing into the gloom. Molly shifted beside him, mumbling something regarding flapjacks in her slumber. He pivoted to glance at her, his torso aching. What was he supposed to inform her in the dawn? That her father forfeited his occupation for preserving somebody's existence, that the verity doesn't matter when the one articulating it is impoverished and invisible. Bernard reclined back against the headrest, his gaze scorching deity. He murmured, if you're heating, what am I supposed to do now? Exterior thunder rumbled. Precipitation commenced to drum against the pane. The leaky drain tapped a stable rhythm, like a pulse of mocking, tireless beat on the opposite side of the metropolis. In a brightly illuminated loft, Alexandra Ashcroft sat in front of her portable. The recording had concluded playing, but the picture of Bernard kneeling beside her was still etched into her mind. She observed the dread on his visage, the resolve, the bravery, and the terror. As he was dragged away like a felon, she struck halt anew, reclined back in her seat, shoulders rigid. She had constructed a billion-dollar domain on decisive selections and faith in the hierarchy of command, but this had glided past her like vapor, and had nearly demolished a gentleman. Her mandible tightened. Locate him, she murmured into the serene chamber Before this proceeds too far, Alexandra Ashcroft didn't summon her chauffeur. She donned denims a pullover and seized her own vehicle, keys the ebony luxury. Sedan glided through the metropolis like a phantom as she headed westward, observing the vitreous and metal skyscrapers gradually yield to aged brick structures, peeling wall paintings, and panes bordered with warped timber. It had been an extended period since she'd driven herself. Anywhere the sensation felt correct, the area where Bernard resided was a realm entirely distinct from the domain of vitreous and orage. She commanded craters, rattled her tires, children played on muddy plots, chasing each other around corroded vehicles. A gentleman vended frankfurters from a battered wagon, vapor ascending in thick ivory clouds in the biting chill. She located a location, a low brown structure with peeling tint and a sagging metallic staircase. She parked, stepped out, and a December atmosphere slashed at her neck. Like a blade, she rapped a few. Instant of quietude elapsed before the portal creaked. Open, a little girl manifested, locks tied up hastily, tea-blouse too slender for the climate. Her gaze expanded. You're the lady from the advertisement, she murmured. I'm seeking Bernard, Alexandra uttered, softening her timbre. He resides here. Doesn't he? The girl's visage pinched with concern. He's ill, she uttered quietly. He won't arise. I attempted preparing broth. I attempted. Giving him remedy, nothing functioned. He just keeps uttering he's. Fatigued, then, he lies down anew. Alexandra's pharynx tightened. How long has he been like this? Since he forfeited his occupation, the girl retorted. He ceased consuming. He kept uttering, it's not fair, then. He just ceased. Alexandra thrust the portal open and stepped interior. The dwelling was tiny faded barriers, a radiator rumbling. But barely warming the chamber, Bernard lay curled on a slender bed pad tucked into the corner, wrapped in two worn coverings. His visage was gaunt, cheeks hollow breath. Frighteningly shallow, she knelt beside him. Bernard, she murmured, it's me, Alexandra Ashcroft. He didn't shift. She took his palm. It burned with fever. Summon an emergency vehicle. She yelled toward the passage. Now the girl positioned frozen in the corner, clutching a ragged, stuffed bear. Gaze wide, Alexandra squeezed Bernard's palm harder. You preserve my existence. She uttered her timbre, cracking. Now it's my turn to preserve yours. When the distant wail of sirens commenced echoing through the avenue, she glanced at the gentleman who had drawn her back from demise and comprehended one matter clearly. This occasion she could not let him glide away. The emergency vehicle pulled up in front of the structure, lights spinning silently. Emergency responders worked swiftly, inquiring quick clipped inquiries. Alexandra barely registered the instant Bernard's limp form was lifted onto the gurney. All she knew was that she stepped into the emergency vehicle after him, sans hesitation, disregarding the adjacent residents peeking out from panes and verandas. Interior of the conveyance, an emergency responder clipped an oxygen monitor to Bernard's digit and wrapped a blood pressure cuff around his limb. Severe dehydration, fever above 103, shallow inhaling. How long has this been going on? He inquired. Alexandra gripped the edge of her seat. I don't know. I just located him like this. No, this is systemic tension. The emergency responder grumbled, hanging in foresack on the hook. Above, we've got to stabilize him swiftly. The emergency vehicle jolted as it turned onto a primary road. Alexandra glanced down at Bernard's visage, ashen, sunken beads of perspiration on his forehead. She extended out carefully, slipping her palm back into his, avoiding the four tubing. His digits didn't shift, but she didn't let go. You fought to maintain me vital, she murmured. Don't quit now. Hold on. Emergency responder uttered suddenly, gaze widening as recognition flashed across his visage. You're Alexandra Ashcroft. Alexandra bobbed stiffly. He glanced from her to Bernard. He's the one who, yes, she uttered. The emergency responder didn't utter more, but his expression shifted something like respect. 20 minutes subsequently, they arrived at a private medical hub on the north side, one of the finest in the metropolis. Alexandra had summoned ahead a team of physicians, and caregivers waited at the emergency portal and swiftly took over, thrusting Bernard through the double portals. Alexandra followed until a caregiver gently lifted a palm to halt her wheel. Care for him, Miss Ashcroft. Please linger here. She bobbed, stepping back, gaze staying on the gurney until it vanished beyond the swinging portals. The waiting chamber was nearly flawless. Soft hide seats, warm illumination, a piano in the corner playing gentle music. But to Alexandra, everything felt submerged, muffled. She stood, paced, sat anew. She summoned Fiona Redford, her legal aid. He's at Northside Medical. Cancel all for the next duo of days and bring his daughter Molly here. She's alone at residence. I'll do it immediately, Fiona uttered, sans an instant of hesitation. When Molly arrived with a social labor about an hour subsequently, Alexandra was positioned by the pain, observing thin snowflakes fall across the Philadelphia horizon. She pivoted when she heard the girl's timbre. Is my dad okay? She knelt to be at eye level with Molly. The physicians are caring for him. Your dad is very robust. He preserved my existence once. Remember, I believe he can do it. A new Molly bobbed, trying to be brave, hugging her stuffed bear tight. I prepared broth for him, but he wouldn't consume. I tried my best. You did more than your best, Alexandra uttered gently. You cared for him the way he cared for me. A caregiver appeared at the portal, Miss Ashcroft. You could observe him now. Alexandra stood, took Molly's palm, and followed the caregiver through a serene corridor into a private chamber. Bernard lay on the bed, an oxygen tube beneath his nose for fluid dripping steadily into his limb. His torso rose and fell slowly. Steadily, he'll pull through. The caregiver uttered softly. Severe exhaustion, dehydration, malnutrition. His immune system crashed under tension, but he's responding well. His vitals are improving. Alexandra let out a breath. She hadn't realized she'd been holding. Thank you, she uttered. Molly stepped to the bedside and placed her stuffed bear on her father's torso. I care for you, Daddy, she murmured. Alexandra stood beside the bed, glancing at Bernard. His visage was less gray, now the lines softer, less shattered. She pulled up a seat, sat down, and stayed there for an extended period. At one point, Molly dozed off in the corner, curled up under a clinic covering. A caregiver brought in hot broth and crackers. Alexandra barely touched hers. She only sat observing Bernard, her mind spinning through layers of remorse and uncertainty. She recalled the board gathering the dawn. He had ambled in the way. No one glanced at him the way even she hadn't spared him. A glance. He had stepped into that chamber like air. And yet that invisible gentleman had been the one to preserve her existence. It hadn't just been a resuscitation procedure. It had been defiant authority, facing dread, standing against a system that expected him to bow. His cranium remained silent and vanish. She couldn't erase what had occurred, but she could and would alter all that occurred next. Hours elapsed. Night settled in completely. The sole noises were the stable beeps of the monitors and Molly's soft inhaling. Then Sans warning Bernard. Stirred, his eyelids fluttered, his digits twitched. Alexandra shot to her feet. Bernard, his cranium tilted, gaze opening, blinking several times before coming into focus. Where am I? He rasped. You're in the clinic, she uttered gently. You collapse, but you're safe now. He scowled. Timbre, barely a murmur. Why are you here? She knelt beside the bed. Her timbre wavered. Because I observed the recording, all of it, every second. I observed what you did. You preserved my existence, and they chastised you for it. Bernard, I'm truly apologetic. Tears welled in his gaze. They claimed I violated you. I know, she responded, mandible tightening. They lied, and I let them lie on my behalf. But it won't be like that anymore. He pivoted away, blinking hard. It doesn't matter. I'm just a custodian, somebody like me. No one believes, no matter what I utter. I believe you, she uttered slowly, not just because I observed the video, but because I felt in that instant you were the sole one who did anything, the sole one who didn't. Pivot away. Bernard glanced back at her. His timbre was weak, but clear. Then assist me, not just with physicians or bills. Assist me, be seen. Assist my daughter mature in a realm where doing the right matter doesn't signify losing all. Alexander Bob once in a new firmer. I was just glancing at him one more time, then murmured, you're not invisible anymore. Morning illumination glided through the clinic, draped, sketching serene bands across the pale verdant barrier. Bernard was dozing, his inhaling now stable, his visage no longer pallid, but milder, warmer. Beside him, Alexandra Ashcroft sat back in an easy chair, elbows resting on her knees, gaze never departing the gentleman who had rattled her whole realm simply by doing what no one else had dared to do all evening. She hadn't departed. The chamber, the burden of remorse still adhered to her shoulders like a damp covering, heavy, chilly, suffocating for a lady who had constructed a billion-dollar domain by making tough determinations and honoring the hierarchy of commanders, had glided through her digits like vapor, and it had almost swept away an entire human existence. She retrieved her device and accessed Bernard's dossier. Fiona had remained alert all evening, assembling all she could locate, stitching it into a complete image that the remainder of the realm had carelessly discarded. Moniker Bernard. James Kellerman, age 34, education, secondary school certificate, 1 year of communal college. In caregiving, dropped out due to monetary difficulty, employment, chronicle, sanitation. Services, part-time senior, care, meal, conveyance, family, 1 daughter, Molly, ex-spouse, Charlotte Reed. Charlotte's guardianship was revoked by the tribunal 3 years ago. Location, West Philadelphia, known for elevated offense rates, decaying framework, and being forgotten by the metropolis. There were even notations from prior proprietors attached to a filed expulsion notice. He had been 2 months behind on Lisa's power, had been severed a week before. Alexander swallowed hard. All of this had occurred after he preserved her existence. She arose and stepped into the corridor. A caregiver thrust a cart past and bobbed. Courteously, Alexandra ambled to a small, serene corner near the family lingering area, reclined back against a barrier, retrieved her device. and summoned Fiona. Yes, Miss Ashcroft, Fiona responded almost. Promptly dispatched 2 vehicles to West Philadelphia, 1 to retrieve his daughter, 1 to retrieve the adjacent resident who's been observing her. I desire them relocated to temporary lodging, fully equipped, secure, close to fine school, comprehended, and summon Dr. Morrison. Inform him I desire the adjacent resident, Janet Holloway, to have a complete exam today, comprehensive medical assessment. I'll organize it, and one more matter. Fiona Alexandra added her timbre, softening just a bit to ensure there's a small bed or cradle ready in a new spot. Just in case Molly is too frightened to sleep alone. There was a pause on the opposite, and I comprehend Madame Alexander disconnected, and returned to the chamber. Bernard was alert, now propped up on cushions. His gaze were still heavy with exhaustion, but far clearer than the evening before. Molly sat beside him, legs swinging, off the edge of the seat, coloring intently with a set of crayons. A caregiver had gathered up somewhere when she observed Alexandra enter. The girl glanced up and beamed. Hi, Miss Ashcroft. Hi, Molly. How's your dad? He's improved. Now the girl chirped, holding up her illustration. He grinned when I displayed him. This Alexander pivoted to Bernard. You're back with us now, aren't you? It's not like I had anywhere else to proceed. He retorted dryly, though the corner of his mouth twitched. You really observed the recording? She bobbed. All of it, Alexandra affirmed. I observe you combat to maintain me vital, while everyone else stood frozen. And then I observed him regard you like a felon. Bernard, I am deeply apologetic. Bernard tilted his cranium back, gazing up at the ceiling. Apologetic doesn't alter what they didn't know. She concurred, but it's a commencing point. And so as this, she extended into her overcoat pocket and retrieved a neatly creased sheet of paper. This is an official declaration, signed and authenticated under my moniker. Clearing your record states that your actions were emergency medical involvement, life preserving, and entirely appropriate under the circumstances. No wrongdoing, no infringement. He hesitated before taking. His digits quivered slightly as he unfolded the page. His gaze scanned each line, his lips parting ever so slightly. And there's more. Alexander proceeded. I've had your daughter and your adjacent resident relocate to a secure, fully equipped dwelling free of charge until you're back on your feet, and I desire to offer you a position. He snapped his cranium up. What? No, you don't have to. I do, she interrupted, though her timbre remained tender. Because I permitted them to dismantle your existence under my moniker. I can't erase what they've done, but I can ensure that from now on you're never left position alone and new. He swallowed hard, blinking rapidly. Why do you care now? She fell silent for an instant, choosing her terms. Because when I was on the brink of demise, I didn't observe custodian. I observed the gentleman, combating to maintain me vital. And after I endured, I let the realm erase you. That made me complicit, and I don't desire to be that person anymore. Molly glanced up and interrupted. I informed you, Dad. She's a good person. Bernard exhaled, half chuckle, half surrender. You've always been better at judging people than I am. Alexander grinned faintly. There's one more matter, if you're willing to hear it. I desire to offer you a role not in sanitation. You will be the director of a new employee welfare initiative I'm launching at Ashcroft Holdings. Bernard's gaze expanded. Excuse me, what I desire you to assist design a system that ensures no one gets left behind anew, especially the people who maintain the lights on and the floors clean. I desire you to be the one to reconstruct what I permitted to decay. He stared at her, stunned. Last evening you uttered something. She proceeded, that you didn't just need assistance, you needed to be seen. That line has been looping in my head ever since. Bernard gripped the edge of the covering. I don't have the qualifications for something like that. You do, Alexandra uttered, stepping closer. Because you comprehend, you know what it feels like to be regarded as invisible, and now you have the chance to alter that for others. Bernard glanced at Molly, then back at Alexandra. I need time to think, of course. She bobbed. Take all the time you need. She pivoted apart, but paused at the portal, glancing back over her shoulder. Oh, Bernard, you preserved me once, maybe. This is my chance to return the favor. The portal closed behind her. Bernard reclined, his cranium back against the cushion, the declaration still in his palm. For the initial time in weeks, he permitted himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end of his tale. Maybe it was only the commencement. 2 days subsequently, Bernard crossed the threshold of the new dwelling. For the initial time, his legs still quivered after days in the clinic, and his right palm was bandaged with a forehead. Been for nearly 48 hours, but all that abruptly felt small. He positioned still for an extended instant in the middle of the living chamber. Just a glance, warm golden illumination washed over the cozy space. No more crack-peeling barriers, no more flickering ceiling bulb that couldn't decide between on and off, no more wheezing age radiator coughing the corner. Instead, there was a beige settee with clean cushions, a low wooden coffee Table a soft rug underfoot, and drapes matching the barriers. The dwelling carried a faint aroma of citrus mingled with the scent of new fabric, like the aroma of a commencement Molly shot, past some gaze, wide merriment. Ringing, "We have our own cooking area, Daddy. Look, there's even grain in the cupboard." Bernard fluttered his eyes, combating down the salt. Ascending at the corners of his gaze, Janet, their adjacent resident, stepped in slowly, behind them leaning on the new ambulator the clinic had given her. Her back was still bent, her legs still stiff, but her gaze were brighter than they'd been in weeks. "Oh, my lord," Janet grumbled. "I haven't observed a spot this clean and decent since your Aunt Beatrice's wedding." Bernard chuckled, a sound still shaky, but genuine. The three of them stepped fully interior and closed the portal like closing an age chapter for the initial time, an extended time. They didn't feel like they were squatting in a spot that didn't desire them this time. This was their residence. On the cooking counter sat a welcome bundle with his moniker on it. Next to it, a small vase of white blossoms. A card was tucked under the vase. "You deserve tranquility." Bernard creased the card and pressed it lightly to his torso, as if pinning down a memory in the days since departing the clinic. He hadn't observed Alexandra in person, knew, but her fingerprints were everywhere. Private medical care for him. And Janet, a full-service relocating company, pre-booked therapy sessions. For Molly, the occupation offer is still sitting in his messages inbox. She didn't push, she didn't summon to demand a response. She simply opened a space for him to choose, and right now that was what he appreciated most. He stepped into the cooking area and took in a gleam of stainless steel appliances. In the cooler, there was a loaf of bread, a carton of milk, a pack of eggs, more than he'd had it once in weeks. Molly opened a cupboard and retrieved a box of colored crayons. "There's paper too, Daddy. I get to illustrate." A new Janet eased herself onto a stool. At the cooking counter, her gaze sweeping the chamber. "Child, you sure this isn't some kind of trap? No proprietor? Is this kind sans desiring something back?" Bernard pivoted to her. "She hasn't inquired me for anything." Janet narrowed her gaze, still skeptical. "No one gives as much sans desiring something sooner or later." Bernard was quiet for a few seconds before he responded. "She's not handing down charity. She's giving me back fairness, and maybe this is how she's doing it." Janet snorted softly. "Fairness is supposed to show up before they drag your moniker through the mud, not after everything's already broken." Bernard didn't argue. He didn't know how to anyway. He ambled into the small bedroom at the end of the corridor, a monarch-sized bed with clean sheets, a wardrobe, a bedside lamp, no moldy panes, no chipped corners on the barrier. On the nightstand sat a small stack of books, titles on guidance, employee welfare, and one about enduring public scandal. On the last book's cover, a sticky note was attached. "Page 47, it once assisted me." Bernard let out a faint, almost disbelieving chuckle, then sat on the brink of the bed, running his palm over the soft comforter. From the living chamber, Molly's timbre drifted in. "Daddy, can I go downstairs and observe the little garden later?" "Honey," Bernard called back, "we got a lot of boxes to unpack first." Janet shuffled to the portal with her ambulator leaning against the frame as she glanced at him. "You really thinking about taking that occupation?" Bernard glanced up. "Honest, I don't know yet. Just hearing about it is scary." Janet's timbre softened unexpectedly. "You knelt in the middle of a meeting room and face down demise, sans your palms shaking, and now an office occupation scares you." "It's not the occupation," Bernard uttered quietly. "It's being seen." That evening, after Molly had dozed off in the twin bed with the prehistoric creature sheets she'd picked from a directory, and Janet was settled on the settee in the living chamber, Bernard stepped out onto the small veranda. City lights glittered in the distance, not so far that he felt cut off, but far enough to remind him how far he'd come in just a few days. He sat down in a woven seat, pulled a light covering around his shoulders, and let his thoughts spill freely. The unfairness was still there. The gossips online hadn't vanished overnight. People still murmured his moniker. At the corner, Marta's device still vibrated occasionally with anonymous dispatches, but in this serene instant he felt something. Unfamiliar hope. Not safety, not yet, but the sense that matters were still capable of changing. His device vibrated a new dispatch from Alexandra Ashcroft. "No pressure, but I'd be honored if you come observe the new office space. It's yours to shape. Whatever you dream up commence." There below was an attachment, a photo of a vacant office floor, wide-pane sunlight pouring in freshly tinted barriers, spotless floors waiting for the initial footsteps. Bernard stared at it for extended time he could almost observe a spot. Sans front portals for the wealthy and back portals for the cleaners. A spot where benefits signified more than a bowl of fruit. In the break chamber, a spot where voices like his weren't just permitted to exist, but needed. He typed back, "I'll come take a glance one step at a time." His digits hovered, then he added, "Thank you for giving me room to inhale." He set the device down, reclined back, and closed his gaze, and for the initial time in weeks, Bernard slept sans waking in. Terror. Next Monday, Bernard, positioned in front of the gleaming vitreous structure in River North Augusta, carried the aroma of freshly roasted Java, and the pavement was still glossy from precipitation. He adjusted his neckwear and glanced up at the sign Ashcroft, Holdings Executive Annex. Fiona's dispatch was still their third-level elevator on the right. She'll be waiting. As he stepped into foyer, Bernard could clearly sense gaze on him, but this occasion, it wasn't suspicion or wariness, it was recognition. Protection guard bobbed at him. The receptionist grinned warmly, just small gestures, but to Bernard they were the kind of acknowledgement he had never truly had before the elevator chimed. The portals opened, lifting him to a completely vacant open level, only flooded sunlight, and a wide view of the river. In the distance, Alexandra Ashcroft, positioned by the Payne Java cup in palm. I was starting to wonder if you'd change your mind, she uttered, still glancing out. I almost did, Bernard admitted twice right before I ambled out the portal, but I'm very glad you came anyway. Bernard ambled slowly around the space. The spot feels different, less chilly. That intentional, she retorted. This entire level is yours. The new department still trying to convince me to take the occupation. He raised an eyebrow. Alexander grinned. I just desire you to know this portal is open, and if anyone deserves to design an employee welfare initiative, it's somebody who knows what it feels like to be overlooked. Bernard glanced out through the clear vitreous, the river glinting, boats moving beneath the bridges. I've never had an office. The only keys I ever possessed were for a supply closet and a swab cabinet. Then it's time you had another key, she uttered calmly. Why are you really doing this? He inquired, this time glancing straight at her. Alexander didn't glance away. Because when I was lying on that floor right between life and demise, I realized I didn't deserve half the respect people gave me. Not the way you did. Power sans responsibility is just an illusion, and I've had enough of that illusion. She retrieved a thick sketch pad and a marker. All of this is yours, Bernard. Access to the initial page, completely blank. He took the stylus and drew a breath. I desire panes in every working chamber, real light. No more break chambers that look like broom closets. And I desire a real welfare fund, transportation support, child care, lease assistance. Not just a couple of yoga classes for the sake of pretty photos. Alexander scribbled notes. Quickly, you're demanding. I'm not here to demand, Bernard uttered, his timbre firm. I'm here to construct. An hour elapsed. The sketch on the table was filled with boxes and Aero support office, counseling chambers, of space where employees could wait for their kids, a serene area for evening shift workers. So am I supposed to take this as you saying yes? Alexander inquired. I'm saying yes, he bobbed, not because I desire to labor for you, but because I desire to labor for the people you and this whole system use to forget people like me. That's the best yes I've ever heard, she retorted. Bernard paused at the portal and pivoted back. Thank you, Alexander, not just for the occupation, but for choosing to observe me. I should have done that sooner, she uttered. Quietly, we all observe things too late. At some point, he grinned. What matters is what we choose to do once we finally observe them. Across the metropolis, in a dim discussion chamber lit only by warm yellow lamps, Tyler Brigham poured spirits with a quivering palm. The news had already reached him, and it made him feel sick. Alexandra was constructing a new department, and she had just put him in charge of it. That custodian. Tyler glanced down at his device. The picture hit him full in the visage. Bernard positioned beside his daughter. In the press release, the title screamed, Ashcroft appoints Bernard Kellerman as Director of Employee Welfare Initiative, a step toward fairness in the workplace. Tyler's mandible clenched, veins standing out along his neck. For years, he had been the one crafting this personnel ecosystem. Quiet dismissals, hush agreements, dossiers pushed into the dark. And now a gentleman from the supply closet had been handed a seat Tyler had always observed as an extension of his own power. He dialed a numeral. It's Brigham I need. Something done quietly off the books. The timbre on the other end was low. Proceed. Locate me. Anything on Bernard Kellerman. Old debts erased. Records. Juvenile offenses. Anything I desire him discredited. That's going to cost you. I didn't inquire the price. Tyler growled. I inquired if you could do it the next dawn. Precipitation hammered the panes like impatient, knocking Bernard positioned by the basin, holding a mug of cold Java sands, realizing that there was a strange feeling in his torso as if something was waiting for him. And it wasn't good. His device vibrated. A dispatch from Fiona. Summon me now. Something's up. Bernard dialed promptly. There's been a leak. Fiona got straight to the point. Your old expulsion records, clinic papers, even a sealed juvenile misdemeanor. Somebody's trying to smear you, Bernard. Brigham. Bernard uttered softly, sans needing to think. Alexandra is furious. Fiona added letter B. He retorted, his timbre oddly calm. I'm not hiding. When he arrived at the Ashcroft Annex, the atmosphere was strung tight, like a wire gossips had raced ahead of him. By miles, but Bernard ambled in with his cranium held high on his workstation, lay a bright bouquet of sunflowers, and a handwritten card to Verity is always louder than the noise keep ambled AA within an hour. He requested an all-staff gathering for the annex, the chamber filled quickly, administrative staff, protection guards, cafeteria workers, maintenance, crew day shift cleaners, evening shift cleaners. Bernard positioned in front of them, with no notes, no slides, just his palms quivering slightly. Some of you have probably observed the titles out there already. He commenced, "There are people who desire you to believe that a person's past is enough to erase their future, that one mistake or one messy record should be enough to silence them forever." He ambled slowly along the front row. I don't believe that he halted and glanced at each visage, tired, curious, skeptical, hopeful. Yes, I've faced expulsion. Yes, I've had overdue bills. Yes, when I was 16, I had a minor charge for stealing cough remedy for my mom. She was ill, and we didn't have the money. That record was sealed years ago. He drew a deep breath. I'm not ashamed of any of that. Those things are part of who I am. This space was created for the people who never get a seat at the big table, for the ones who wept in the supply closet and still ambled out grinning the next day, for those who've been disregarded but kept laboring anyway. He swept his gaze across the chamber and knew you don't have to be perfect to combat for fairness. You just have to be willing to show up, and I'm positioned here. There was a thick instant of quietude. Then somebody started clapping. A second pair of palms joined, and then a third. Within seconds, the entire chamber was filled with applause like rolling thunder, swelling into a heavy, pulsing rhythm. Across town, Alexandra sat with the legal team in a discussion chamber, a screen in front of them crowded with correspondences and documents, proof of the smear campaign. Was right there I desires badge revoked. Alexandra uttered her timbre, as cold as metal today. It's ready, Fiona retorted. We were waiting for your sign-off. And one more matter, Alexander proceeded. Anyone who targets Bernard Kellerman is targeting this enterprise's core values, and they will answer to me 6 months. Subsequently, Bernard positioned on stage at a national conference on labor fairness. This time, he wasn't appearing with swab and cart, but with a presentation of team, and his moniker printed clearly on the main speaker lineup. The welfare initiative he designed had officially launched across the enterprise in the initial month. Alone, more than 200 reports had been submitted, 7 managers had been discharged, 12 employees had been promoted after unfair evaluations were reviewed. Molly sat in the front row, legs swinging, gaze shining, her proud grin impossible to hide. Janet, stronger now after months of physical therapy, clapped the loudest every time Bernard's moniker was mentioned. Alexandra chose a seat farther back, not to take the spotlight, but just to hear my moniker is Bernard Kellerman. He commenced timbre low, but stable, and I'm not the kind of flawless hero you usually observe on posters. A few soft chuckles rippled through the chamber. I don't have a spotless record. I wasn't born into wealth. I was a custodian, a lone data gentleman who observed something wrong and decided not to glance away. I didn't decide to speak up because I desired attention. I did it because there are real people being hurt, disregarded, manipulated, stripped of their timbre. People like me. If that makes me troublesome, then I hope more of us are willing to stand up. And cause that kind of trouble, when he finished, Molly didn't wait a second. She sprinted straight onto the stage and threw her limbs around him. You did so well, Daddy. Bernard chuckled, pulling her close. We did well, honey. This is for all of us. Alexandra ambled up as the applause still rolled through the hall. You've altered this enterprise, Bernard. Not just the people, but the culture, she uttered. We still got a long way to proceed. He retorted, yes, but at least now we're ambled in the right direction. That evening, Bernard sat on the veranda of their new dwelling, bigger, brighter, but still simply glanced out at Philadelphia spread beneath him, city lights flickering like tiny promises in the dark. His device vibrated. A dispatch from June. Just got word we've been inquired to consult for 3 more enterprises. They desire to apply the model you constructed, Bernard. Grin, the alteration was spreading. He wrote back, let's do it one safe workplace at a time. Molly stepped out on the veranda, wrapped in a covering. Are you cold, Dad? No, honey. He pulled her into his lap. I was just thinking how sometimes the worst things that happen to us are the ones that lead us to the best things. Molly curled up against him. So now are you happy? Bernard held his daughter tighter and glanced out at the breathing metropolis. Yeah, baby. Finally, I'm happy. They sat like that, father and daughter on the small veranda overlooking the metropolis. For the initial time in his life, Bernard felt observed not as an anonymous employee, not as the victim of a scandal, but as a human being who deserved his own seat at the table. And he knew that from here on, he would use that seat to ensure others got theirs too. Bernard Kellerman's journey persisted as he delved deeper into his new role at Ashcroft. Holdings the initial weeks were a whirlwind of meeting strategy sessions and late nights poring over policy documents. But Bernard embraced it all with a determination born from years of being overlooked. He started by interviewing the invisible backbone of the company, the custodians, the cafeteria staff, the security guards who worked the graveyard shifts. Their stories poured out like long-held secrets tales of unfair scheduling, denied breaks, and wages that barely covered the bills. Bernard listened without interruption, his own experiences echoing in every word they spoke. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, he sat in his new office, the one with the wide windows overlooking the river, and reflected on how far he'd come from mopping floors to shaping policies that could change lives. But the road wasn't smooth. Whispers still lingered in the hallways some executives viewed his rapid rise with suspicion, calling it favoritism behind closed doors. Tyler Brigham's smear campaign had left scars, but Bernard refused to let it define him. Instead, he channeled that energy into action, launching anonymous feedback channels and mandatory training on workplace equity. Alexandra supported him every step, providing resources and backing his proposals in board meetings. But she also gave him space to lead, knowing that true change had to come from those who'd lived the struggles. One afternoon, Bernard received a call from a former colleague, a night shift cleaner, who'd been let go under suspicious circumstances. "I heard about what you're doing," the man said, voice hesitant. "Can you help?" Bernard didn't hesitate. He dove into the case, reviewing records and advocating for reinstatement. It was the first of many victories. Word spread, and soon his inbox was flooded with similar requests. Employees who felt voiceless now saw a champion in him. Molly noticed a change in her father, too. "You're smiling more, Daddy," she said one morning as they shared breakfast in their new kitchen. He ruffled her hair. "Thanks to you, kiddo, you're my good luck charm." Janet, too, was thriving. Her medical checkups revealed issues that had been ignored for years, but with proper care, she was regaining strength. She even started volunteering at the community center, teaching knitting classes to kids. But amid the progress, shadows loomed. Tyler Brigham wasn't done after his initial smear failed. He dug deeper, hiring private investigators to unearth any dirt on Bernard. One rainy evening, Bernard's phone buzzed with an anonymous text. "Check your mail, old skeletons are coming out." Bernard dismissed it as a prank, but the next day a package arrived at his door. Inside were copies of old court documents from his ex-wife's custody battle. Twisted to pain him. As unstable, his heart sank as he read the manipulated narrative. This wasn't just about discrediting him, it was personal. He called Alexandra, who arrived within the hour, her face a mask of controlled fury. "This ends now," she said together. They traced the package back to Tyler's associates. The evidence was damning: emails coordinating the leaked forged documents. To amplify the scandal, Alexandra confronted Tyler. "In a tense boardroom meeting, you're fired," she declared, effective immediately. "Your actions not only violated company policy, but betrayed the very principles we're rebuilding." Tyler stormed out, vowing revenge, but his threats fell flat. Without his position, he was powerless. The incident only strengthened Bernard's resolve. He organized a company-wide town hall, sharing his story unfiltered, including the recent attack. "I won't pretend my life has been perfect," he told the assembled staff, "but perfection isn't required for fairness. What matters is standing up even when it's hard." The applause was thunderous, inspiring others to share their own experiences. The welfare program expanded, offering mental health support, financial counseling, and even scholarships for employees' children. Molly was the first recipient, enrolling in an after-school art program where she flourished. But Bernard's impact extended beyond Ashcroft. Invitations came from other companies seeking his expertise on building equitable workplaces. He traveled to conferences, speaking on panels about social mobility and corporate responsibility. At one event, a young janitor approached him afterward. "You give me hope," he said. Bernard shook his hand. "We're in this together." Back home, life settled into a rhythm of normalcy. Movie nights with Molly helping Janet with her garden, even tentative steps toward dating a kind teacher from Molly's school. But the past occasionally resurfaced in quiet moments. Bernard would touch the faded bruise on his back, a reminder that fateful day in the boardroom. It no longer ached, but the memory fueled his drive. Alexandra and Bernard's relationship evolved too, from benefactor and beneficiary to true partners. They collaborated on a nonprofit arm of Ashcroft aimed at community revitalization in West Philadelphia, funding job training programs and affordable housing. One crisp autumn day, they unveiled the first project, a renovated community center named after Bernard's late mother, who had taught him the value of kindness amid hardship. As the ribbon was cut, Molly beamed from the front row. "This is amazing, Daddy." Bernard hugged her close. "We did this together, sweetheart. But challenges persisted a rival company launched a copycat program undercutting Ashcroft's efforts with flashy marketing but lacking substance. Bernard countered by emphasizing authenticity, partnering with grassroots organizations to ensure real impact. His efforts paid off, earning awards and media attention that highlighted the human stories behind the policies. Through it all, Bernard remained grounded, visiting his old neighborhood to mentor youth, sharing his journey as proof that one act of courage can spark monumental change. As winter approached, Bernard reflected on the year that had transformed his life from despair to purpose. He sat on the balcony watching snowflakes dance in the city lights, grateful for second chance, and determined to pay it forward. The truth behind Alexander's collapse had indeed shocked everyone, revealing not just a medical emergency, but a systemic failure that Bernard was now dismantling piece by piece. His story wasn't just about saving a life, it was about reclaiming dignity for all who had been deemed unworthy, and in that he found his true calling. As the months unfolded, Bernard's influence at Ashcroft Holdings grew beyond expectations. He spearheaded a mentorship program, pairing entry-level employees with executives, fostering understanding across hierarchies. The initiative not only boosted morale, but also uncovered innovative ideas that had previously been silenced. One such idea, from a warehouse worker, led to a revamped logistics system, saving the company millions. Alexandra praised Bernard's vision in a company newsletter, calling him the catalyst for our cultural renaissance. But success brought new pressures. Media outlets hounded him for interviews, eager to spin his rags to riches tale. Bernard navigated the spotlight carefully, always redirecting focus to the systemic issues that affected countless others. In a televised interview, he stated, "My story isn't unique. It's the story of every overlooked worker who deserves a fair shot." The exposure attracted allies, philanthropists, and policymakers reached out, offering collaborations to expand his model nationwide. Bernard formed alliances, hosting workshops on ethical leadership and worker rights. Molly adapted to their new life. With the resilience of youth, her art classes blossomed into a passion, and she even won a local contest with a drawing depicting her father's heroic moment in the boardroom. "Daddy the Hero," she titled it. Bernard framed it, hanging it prominently in his office as a reminder of what truly mattered. Janet became an unofficial advisor, sharing wisdom from her years of hardship. She joined Bernard at community events, speaking on the importance of dignity in labor. Her health continued to improve, allowing her to live independently in a nearby apartment. Yet not all was smooth sailing. Remnants of Tyler's network attempted subtle sabotage, leaking false rumors to tabloid. Bernard countered with transparency, posting updates on the company's internal forum, addressing concerns head-on. His honesty disarmed critics, turning potential scandals into opportunities for dialogue. One evening, after a long day, Bernard received a distressing call from a former co-worker at another firm facing similar injustice. Inspired by Bernard's story, the worker sought advice. Bernard guided him through filing a formal complaint, connecting him with legal aid. The case gained traction, exposing exploitative practices and leading to industry-wide reforms. Bernard's personal life also evolved. He began dating Elena, the teacher from Molly's school. Their relationship was tentative at first, built on shared values and quiet dinners, but it brought a warmth Bernard hadn't felt in years. Molly adored her, often inviting her to family game nights. As spring arrived, Bernard organized Ashcroft's first employee appreciation gala, not a lavish affair for executives, but a celebration for all staff. Families included. Molly performed a short skit reenacting the boardroom scene. The cheers and laughter. Alexandra presented Bernard with an award for outstanding leadership. In her speech, she admitted, "Bernard didn't just save my life. He saved this company." Soul. The event marked a turning point, symbolizing true inclusivity. But challenges persisted. An economic downturn threatened layoffs. Bernard fought tirelessly, advocating for retraining programs over Cutz's efforts preserved hundreds of jobs, earning him respect from even the staunchest skeptics outside work. Bernard volunteered at the West Philadelphia Community Center, teaching CPR classes, the same skill that changed his fate. Participants ranged from teens to seniors, all eager to learn empowerment through preparedness. One student, a young single mother, shared how Bernard's story gave her hope to pursue nursing school. He mentored her, helping with applications and scholarships. Alexandra and Bernard's partnership deepened. They co-authored a book on corporate responsibility, blending her business acumen with his lived experience. The proceeds funded scholarships for underprivileged youth. The launch event drew crowds, with Bernard's heartfelt reading moving many to tears. As summer approached, Bernard reflected on his transformation from a janitor fighting for survival to a leader driving change. He sat with Molly on their balcony, watching fireworks light the sky. Sometimes the darkest moments lead to the Brightest lights, he told her. She nodded wisely. Yeah, Dad, like how? You kissed that lady to save her, Bernard laughed, correcting her gently. It was CPR, sweetie. But yes, something like that. The journey wasn't over New Horizons, beckon invitations to speak internationally, offers to consult for global firms. But Bernard remained rooted, prioritizing his family and community. He knew true success wasn't in accolades, but in the lives touched and injustices righted through it, all the truth behind Alexandra's. Collapse continued to unfold not as a singular event, but as a ripple effect, transforming one man's act of courage into a movement for equity and humanity. With the foundation solidly laid, Bernard turned his attention to scaling the impact beyond Ashcroft's walls. He partnered with local universities to develop certification programs in workplace advocacy, training future leaders in ethical management. The curriculum drew from his experiences, blending theory with real-world anecdotes. Enrollment surged, attracting diverse participants eager for change. One graduate reformer retail worker credited Bernard's course with empowering her to negotiate better conditions at her job. Your story showed me I'm not powerless, she wrote. In a thank you note, Bernard kept such messages in a drawer, rereading them on tough days. As the program gained traction, media coverage intensified. A national magazine featured Bernard in a profile titled From Mop to Movement, highlighting his unconventional path. The article delved into boardroom incident, framing it as a pivotal moment that exposed corporate inequalities. Bernard used the platform to call for broader reforms, urging companies to prioritize people over profits. The response was overwhelming. Letters and emails flooded in from workers sharing their struggles. Inspired, Bernard launched a podcast, Voices from the Floor, inviting guests to discuss labor issues. Episodes covered topics like work-life balance, discrimination, and union rights. Listeners tuned in by the thousands, finding solidarity in shared experiences. Alexandra guest starred on an episode reflecting on her awakening. I was blind to the inequities in my own company, she admitted. Bernard's courage opened my eyes. The conversation resonated, sparking online discussions and calls for accountability. Meanwhile, personal milestones. Daughter Bernard's life, Molly's 10th birthday, was a joyous affair celebrated with a backyard party in their new home. Friends from her old neighborhood mixed with new classmates, symbolizing the bridge between past and present. Janet baked the cake, her hands steadier now thanks to ongoing therapy. As candles were blown out, Bernard felt profound gratitude for the family that had anchored him through storms, but adversity lurked. A disgruntled former executive leaked internal memos attempting to undermine the welfare program, claiming it was financially unsustainable. Bernard addressed the crisis head on, hosting a transparent webinar detailing the program's ROI not just in dollars, but in employee retention and productivity. The data silenced doubters, turning the attack into a testament to the initiative's value. Elena became a steady presence, offering support during stressful times. Their relationship deepened over shared walks and deep conversations. She encouraged Bernard to pursue a degree, something he'd abandoned years ago. With her nudge, he enrolled in night classes, balancing work, family, and studies. It was exhausting, but fulfilling, a step toward formalizing his expertise. As fall arrived, Bernard organized a charity run to benefit community centers. The event drew hundreds, including Ashcroft employees and local residents. Molly ran alongside him, her small legs pumping with determination. Crossing the finish line together, Bernard lifted her in triumph. This is what change looks like, he said. The funds raised equipped several centers with new resources, extending his impact to grassroots level. International interest grew. A European firm invited Bernard to consult on their operations. He traveled abroad, sharing his model and adapting it to cultural context. The trip was eye-opening, reinforcing that worker struggles transcended borders. Upon return, he incorporated global insights into Ashcroft's policies, enhancing diversity training. But home, called strongest a health scare with Janet, reminded Bernard of life's fragility. She recovered quickly, but the incident prompted him to prioritize self-care, implementing wellness days company-wide, leading by example. As a year wound down, Bernard reflected on the ripple effects of that one act in the boardroom. It had saved a life, sparked redemption, and ignited a movement. Sitting with his family by the fireplace, he knew the work was ongoing, but the foundation was unshakable. Hope had replaced despair. Purpose had eclipsed survival, and in that transformation lay the true victory. Years passed, and Bernard's legacy continued to expand, evolving from a company initiative into a national standard for workplace reform. His employee welfare model was adopted by dozens of corporations, leading to legislative changes that mandated fair treatment for low-wage workers. He testified before congressional committees, sharing his journey with poise and passion. Lawmakers moved by his authenticity pushed through bills enhancing labor protections. Bernard watched from the gallery as the president signed the act into law, a moment that felt surreal for former janitor, but triumphs were tempered by ongoing battles. Economic shifts brought new challenges like automation, threatening jobs. Bernard adapted his program, incorporating reskilling workshops in AI and digital literacy, partnering with tech firms to ensure workers weren't left behind. One initiative trained custodians in facility management, software turning potential layoffs into promotions. Molly, now a teenager, pursued her artistic dreams, attending a prestigious high school on a scholarship she earned through her portfolio. Her work often reflected themes of resilience and justice. Inspired by her father's story at a school exhibition, she unveiled a mural depicting the boardroom scene, stylized with vibrant colors, symbolizing hope amid chaos. Bernard teared up seeing it. "This is incredible, kiddo," he said, hugging her. "You've captured the heart of it all." Janet, ever the pillar of strength, published a memoir about her life. In the Shadows, amplified by Bernard's platform, the book became a bestseller, shedding light on the struggles of aging and poverty. She toured with Bernard, speaking at events. Their combined voices, a powerful testament to overlooked lives. Alexandra and Bernard's collaboration flourished, founding a foundation dedicated to economic equity. They funded startups led by underrepresented entrepreneurs, fostering innovation from the ground up. One success story was a cleaning service app created by a former Ashcroft janitor, revolutionizing the industry with fair pay algorithms. But personal trials tested Bernard's resolve. Elena proposed marriage on a quiet evening walk by the river. Yes, he whispered, overwhelmed with joy. Their wedding was intimate, surrounded by family and friends. Molly served as maid of honor. Janet gave a heartfelt toast to second chances. A celebration marked a new chapter, blending their lives seamlessly. Yet shadows from the past resurfaced. Tyler Brigham resurfaced in the news, launching a rival consulting firm peddling outdated corporate models. He attempted to discredit Bernard in interviews, twisting facts to suit his narrative. Bernard responded with grace, publishing an op-ed on forgiveness and growth. "I harbor no ill," he wrote. "Let's focus on building a better future." The public sided with Bernard, his integrity shining through. As winter returned, Bernard faced a health setback, echoes of his earlier collapse. Doctors attributed it to stress, prescribing rest and balance. Alexander stepped in, managing foundation duties while he recovered. Molly and Elena cared for him at home, reminding him he wasn't alone anymore. The experience reinforced the importance of self-care, prompting Bernard to advocate for mental health days in labor policies. Returning stronger, he launched a campaign for universal health care access. Drawing from his own vulnerabilities, the movement gained traction, influencing policy debates nationwide. Internationally, Bernard's work inspired global adaptations. Organizations in Europe and Asia implemented similar programs, crediting his blueprint at a UN summit. He spoke on sustainable development, emphasizing worker well-being as key to progress. Delegates applauded, committing to collaborations. Back in Philadelphia, Bernard revitalized his old neighborhood, spearheading a community hub with job training, childcare, and health clinics. The center bore his name, a humble honor he accepted with gratitude. Opening day saw old friends and new faces uniting in celebration. As the decade turned, Bernard reflected on the improbable path from that boardroom floor to global stages. One act of humanity had sparked a chain reaction, transforming lives, including his own. City with his family, watching Molly's college acceptance letter arrive. He knew the story wasn't ending, it was evolving, carried forward by those he'd empowered. In quiet moments, he touched the old scar, reminder that courage in the face of adversity could indeed change everything. Decades later, Bernard Kellerman's influence had become a cornerstone of modern labor rights. His once radical ideas, now standard practice in boardrooms. Worldwide corporations boasted of their Kellerman-inspired programs, touting metrics on employee satisfaction and equity. But Bernard, now in his twilight years, viewed it all with humble reflection from his home, overlooking the Philadelphia skyline, where it all began. He mentored the next generation through virtual seminars, his voice still steady, sharing timeless lessons on empathy and action. Molly had grown into a renowned artist. Her works exhibited globally, often exploring themes of social justice. Her latest series, Shadows to Light, paid homage to her father's journey, each piece a visual narrative of transformation. She collaborated with Bernard on a children's book illustrating his story to inspire young minds. "Daddy, you changed the world," she said during a family dinner. Bernard chuckled, "No, kiddo, we all did together." Janet, long retired, remained a vibrant force, authoring sequels to her memoir and advocating for elder rights. Her foundation provided support for seniors, ensuring no one aged in isolation. Her bond with Bernard, unbreakable, a testament to chosen family. Alexander, now a philanthropist legend, worked alongside Bernard until her retirement, their friendship a beacon of redemption and growth. They co-chaired annual summits, bringing leaders together to tackle emerging issues like gig economy exploitation and AI ethics at one. Event. Alexander reflected on that fateful day. Bernard didn't just breathe life back into me. He ignited a fire for justice that still burns a world at change, but challenges evolved climate crises, and technological disruptions demanded new adaptations. Bernard's foundation pivoted, funding green job training and ethical AI guidelines, ensuring workers remain at the forefront as grandchildren Molly's kids carried the torch. Interning at the organization, their fresh perspectives infusing new energy. Personal joys filled Bernard's later years. Anniversaries with Elena, travels to places he'd only dreamed of, and quiet evenings reminiscing, but health inevitably slowed him. A second heart episode, a gentle reminder of mortality. Surrounded by loved ones, he recovered, focusing on legacy over labor. In his final years, Bernard penned his autobiography, From Floors to Futures, detailing the unvarnished truth of his path. The book became required reading in business schools, emphasizing that true leadership stems from lived experience, not pedigrees. As his story circulated, inspired a biopic with actors portraying the boardroom drama Bernard consulted on set, ensuring authenticity. The film premiered to acclaim, winning awards and reigniting conversations on class divides. Watching from the audience with his family, Bernard whispered, "This isn't about me, it's about us all." The premiere raised funds for scholarships, bearing his name, empowering thousands to pursue education without barriers. Bernard's passing was peaceful, surrounded by those he loved. Tributes poured in from world leaders to everyday workers. A state funeral honored his contributions, but his true memorial lived in the lives, touched the reform systems, and the ongoing fight for equity. Molly took the helm of the foundation, vowing to continue his work. "Dad taught us that one voice can echo forever," she said at the eulogy, "and we'll make sure as does Alexandrian." Her tribute added, "Bernard saved me twice, once in that boardroom and every day since, by showing what true humanity looks like." In the years that followed, his model endured, adapting to new eras, from virtual workplaces to global pandemics, proving resilient because it was built on timeless principles of dignity and fairness. The truth behind Alexander's collapse had unfolded into a saga of redemption, proving that a single act of courage could reshape destinies, and Bernard Kellerman's legacy ensured that the invisible would forever be seen. The journey of Bernard Kellerman teaches us that heroism isn't always in bold, dramatic acts. Sometimes it's found in quiet, resolute decisions, opting for righteousness over ease, voicing truth rather than remaining mute, rising strong when society demands you kneel. This tale reminds us that fairness doesn't demand flawlessness. It demands we reject letting dread shape our reality. Regardless of your origins, regardless of how society views you, your words hold power. And when those words are spoken with sharp intent and unyielding belief, they can grow into a momentum potent enough to reshape a whole structure.